Hi. Oh my gosh, we are live here today. We have some fantastic speakers here in the house, and I'm very, very excited about the presentation we're going to bring you. I am going to start with Dan Sanders. Dan works on his own e-commerce and Amazon stores. He also has his own consultancy. He promotes products and services for IDHL, which I need background on that for sure. More information, but I'm excited to have you here. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be on here today.
Same. Next up, we have Kurt. Kurt is the founder of Convertica. Is that correct? You are I love that name, actually, Convertica.
Thanks.
Your main core offering is A/B testing. And you guys do a lot of the testing as well as full coding and integration and running of the individual tests. It says you've worked with over 700 clients in the last 4 years. I can only imagine the data that you have your hands on. Exciting.
That's it. Yeah, I'm excited to share some of it as we go through today.
Right. And Kurt, okay, so Dan, where are you tuning in from?
So I'm in the UK, so it's not too bad for me. It's 6 o'clock in the evening.
6 o'clock. And Kurt.
It's we're in our last week of our vacation in Thailand at the moment, so it's 3 past midnight. But we are heading back to the UK next week, so it should be a bit more time zone conducive for these type of things. There,
a lot cooler as well for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, only for a bit.
I am so grateful and thankful that you are here so late with us. So hello. I want to next up introduce our featured speaker, Nava Hopkins. If you are not aware of this amazing being, she's brilliant. She is the director of paid media at Just Uno. And Just Uno is an AI-powered CRO platform. She's also one of the top 25 PPC experts. She's an international speaker. She's also a founding board member of the Paid Search organization. And obviously, if you spend some time on SEMrush, you also know she's a SEMrush Academy instructor. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I cannot overstate my enthusiasm, not just for the topic, but to get to share in this conversation with 2 rockstar speakers and to get moderated by your amazing perspective. This session is really designed to make CRO accessible to all. So whether you're a seasoned CRO professional and you want to get into the nitty gritty and ask some super technical questions, whether you're just dipping your toes in and want to kind of get some sound bites to get your team bought into leveraging CRO, we're really excited to bring this session to you.
It's fantastic. I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. So Nava, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. So let me share my screen. Let me get my presenter role up. Perfect. So as was mentioned, I'm the director of paid media over at Just Uno. We are an AI-powered CRO platform. So CRO is very near and dear to my heart. The fun facts about me, Shelly already listed off all my accolades. I'm an avid Star Wars fan, avid gamer, pet mom. So oftentimes I will position digital marketing from the standpoint of dogs or Star Wars. You can follow for PPC tips from my dog HK47, named after the Star Wars character, on PPC Puppy. So today we're really going to dive into 3 basic concepts to get the conversation started, and then it will really be a dialogue. So we strongly recommend put those questions in chat. We're excited to answer them live. We're going to first discuss what is CRO, how can you think about it, and then CRO and creative and targeting. And the reason we separated it is that a lot of times people will fall into the trap of either thinking about CRO from just the creative, so those A/B tests on content, landing pages, design, or they'll only think about it on the pre-click, whether that's from organic or paid, what kind of campaigns are we structuring? So it really is about bringing it all together and building the best workflow for you and your business. So what is CRO? when we're thinking about CRO, it's understanding which creative is going to lead to the best customer path. So we're thinking about leveraging data on user behavior that can be using tools like Full Story, Hotjar, Analytics. It also can be using intel from your sales and CS organizations and really baking in that full customer journey. We also want to make sure that we're creating easier commitments. I don't know how many folks have been paying attention to Privacy First and Flock in iOS 14.5 and the idea of a consensual conversation. But we really want to begin building in those easier opportunities to say yes and how we're able to guide users to see that it is an easy thing to say yes to. So when we're thinking about testing, and this is based off of the thousands of paid media accounts and brands I've gotten to work with on the international stage, these are my rules of engagement. Definitely open to discussion on those. But ideally, you want to really test 1 to 2 major variables per quarter. And the reason for that is that if you put too many variables into the mix, your study is going to be all convoluted. You're not going to be able to really distill what was the root cause behind your success. You also want to bear in mind, a lot of folks will shy away from CRO or conversion rate optimization because they think they have to have 10,000, 100,000 data points in order to say conclusively, yes, this is correct. It can be on a sliding scale. So if you're a smaller organization, 1,000 unique visitors is totally fine to begin building those tests around. You do want something approaching that statistical significance, but you don't need to be trapped in, I need 10,000 plus sessions to make a decision. And then the most important of all, we want to determine what our success and fail measures will be on the outset of whatever we're running. So if we think that we can get a 20% better cost per acquisition, or if we think that we can pull in X percentage better traffic, we want to state that at the onset and then build in milestones to test. So if you're a smaller org, maybe those milestones are every other week. Maybe they're once or twice a month. It depends on how much data you are generating. So it's not necessarily contingent on the size of your business. It's contingent on the amount of data that will be going into your test. So the core questions I like to ask when it comes to landing pages, first, how easy is it to convert? Do I have to think about it, or do I have to hunt for the path to conversion? The answer should be no. We want to make it as stupid simple as possible. Next, what does the user do when they're on site or on page? Are we thinking about a user that goes all over the place? Does the user hit and then bounce back? Does the user even reach the page at all? Is our site too slow to load because it's maybe junked up with all bits of code, whether that's from a technical standpoint or a design standpoint? And is it a trustworthy experience? Are we featuring above the fold trust signals to empower the user to see us as a vetted, useful option? On our A/B tests, is there enough data to make an assessment? So this goes back to that sliding scale. You do not need to have mountains and mountains of data, but you need to have something. And then what variable leads to that better ROAS, or return on ad spend? You need to determine, again, on the onset, what variables will make sense to test together with that 1 to 2 per quarter, if you're going to do 1 to 2 per quarter, or even what are the useful variables? What are kind of what is the company mission at the onset of the year? And what variables might you want to test throughout the year to meet those goals that you as an organization have? You'll notice that I'm talking about this from an organization standpoint. That's because every single department has a part to play when it comes to CRO. And then finally, is the content designed to speak to the targeted user? This goes into that message mapping and really thinking about those tailored audiences and creative and how we are serving what creatives, whether that's ads or landing pages, to which audiences, and what channels are we trying to get them to arrive at those experiences, and how does that all factor into the equation? So on-site CRO, and this is a study that Just So You Know did based off of 3 billion website sessions, 33,000 pop-ups, and $94 million in sales through the Just So You Know platform. We actually found that when it comes to conversion rates, as in money in the till, having those on-site CRO experiences can really, really help get the customer over the line. That's not to say that you can't have conversions, you can't have sales without an on-site signal guiding the user through. But whether it's a banner, whether it's a pop-up to capture the leads, to get that first-party data, it can be really, really powerful. So we're now going to dive into CRO in design. Any questions on any of these comments, definitely put them in the chat because we're going to collectively talk about them together. So when we're thinking about testing, we really want to think about what we want to test. Do we want to test how are we engaging different personas? So for example, almost everyone's familiar with ads for clocks where you have the 10 and the 12. So it's really interesting. Can you apply the data and the learnings from other industries to yours and benefit? So for example, that ZipRecruiter ad with the smile pointing down to the call to action to learn more. That's a very powerful message on the subconscious level. It's a very powerful message on the call to action standpoint. Conversely, although still positively, the privacy that's iPhone ad actually obscures the face. So you're able to project yourself. It doesn't matter which demographic you're targeting. It just matters that the core content of privacy is important. So as you're thinking about what creatives you use, you really want to factor in how easy will it be to speak to your customer. Colors and fonts are going to play a huge role here. And what's really interesting, so for a really long time, blue and orange were the colors of the internet. But what's interesting is that while blue is still a dominantly favorite color for men and for women, this is a crazy egg study, orange is almost not abundantly hated, but it definitely has one of the strongest dislike or least favorite color percentages. And so when you think about brands that chose to go the blue and orange, maybe blue, orange, gray route, they were alienating 20-30% of their customer base. So you really want to think about, is it men, is it women interacting with your brand more? What colors are going to enable the customer not just to feel good about your brand, but also will achieve the subconscious things that different colors are able to do. This is a personal opinion, but it comes as one that is partially dyslexic, I'm mildly dyslexic. I find sans serif fonts much easier to read, but there are benefits to having punctuated uses of serif fonts. And so when we're thinking about landing pages and how the user reads, sometimes a little bit of serif font can actually be very nice. So first point, users read left to right. We want to factor that in, well, at least in most languages they do. There are some bits of content, and as you take your brand internationally, you might want to reposition your content to honor how that particular target market reads. Most markets read left to right. We also typically will find a user will bounce all the way back up to check for contact information. It's a subconscious thing we've all been taught. So as you're thinking about page layout, you definitely want to think about how are you guiding the user to the different calls to action that you find the most valuable. You also want to make sure that you're delivering on the promise that you made with your ad or with your content or what have you. And part of the reason I bring up the sans serif and the serif font question is actually how this brand, Grace and Lace, treats it. They do a very good job of having those trust symbols right above the fold. They highlight the accessibility piece right next to the brand. But what's actually really fascinating is that the on-site CRO components that are designed to get that quick call to action, that quick engagement, are in sans serif fonts where the rest of the site is in serif. So you can make serif fonts work if it is aligned with your brand, and if you use reasonable design theory, you can do an entire site in sans serif. It depends on you and your brand. The final thing I'll point out while we're here is that it is vitally, vitally important that you are building in beautiful experiences to collect the first party opt-in information for data. A lot of brands are doing this very poorly. We don't have the time for us to roast them all, but you definitely want to make sure that it's not a non-obtrusive, easily understood experience. Now, in terms of specific ideas, we all kind of think about new visitor, people coming to the site, or upselling. A lot of folks will shy away from asking for an email on the exit offer because you think like, well, the person's already at the door. I don't want to bother them. What's really interesting about exit offers is they can actually sometimes be super, super useful in planting that seed for a nurtured conversation. So this particular one actually was able to generate over 4,000 emails. And so yes, our engagement rate, it was able to generate those 4,000 emails, but the engagement rate was low. The sale rate was high. So we were able to really close that deal on that exit offer. The other piece to remember is that when you have a promo, you don't always need to give a discount. So when you have a discount, you're kind of discounting your goods, you're discounting your services. Not all prospects are going to value that. Some prospects are going to value being the first to know about a really valued feature. They're going to really appreciate that they get to know before everyone else. And so this was able, yes, it didn't have as high of an engagement rate. It didn't have as high of a conversion rate, but it was able to generate sales, and it was able to build enough of an email list to still target on the ad platform. So ad platforms require at least 1,000 emails to actively target, and then also to build those lookalike and similar audiences. So without offering any discount, it was able to generate that list. It is important to note that the desktop version outperformed the mobile. So when you're thinking about where to place those non-discounted promotions, those non-discounted on-site components, definitely err more on the side of desktop, because mobile is a better fit for impulse purchase, where a discount can push the user over the line to make the sale. So key takeaways, number 1, honor your customer persona. Number 2, your calls to actions and trust symbols should be at the forefront above the fold. Do not bury them. And then we also want to make sure that our lead capture can happen at all stages. We're not just relying on new visitor. We're not saying goodbye to the exit offers. And I'm racing through this because I want to make sure that everyone on this star-powered panel has the chance to participate. You all will get the slides later. So CRO in targeting. As I mentioned, tests are not just limited to creative. Structured tests are vitally important. And a big one to think about is how people search how they think. And those patterns change based off of different parts of the country and different parts of the world. So when you're building a content strategy, when you're building a Google ad account, Microsoft ad account, when you're building your Facebook campaigns, you really want to think about how does a person search. So a really good example of this is actually looking at DUI attorney versus DUI lawyer. Different parts of the country either have DUI or DWI. And the idea of the lawyer versus the attorney is going to factor into which ones will take which and which parts of the country will search in which ways. So as you're building, again, that content strategy that can take months to see fruition, as you're building your campaigns to generate those leads, you want to do that initial research to test. And you likely want to split that up into, say, 3 markets: your tier A, which is your best, your tier B, which is your middle, your tier C, which is kind of your everybody else. And run these tests in that B2C market so that you can really prove it out. So again, before you commit, you want to know where your best customers are. I talk to so many organizations that don't know this. Have a conversation with your sales and CS organizations and just get them to give you that information. I promise you, your CS organization knows this, and your sales organization will definitely have feelings about who's easier to close. You also want to think about what motivates them. Are they motivated by an Agatha Christie spouse or child? Are they motivated by a boss that is mandating a thing? Are they the boss that's going to lead their entire team to connect? And then you also want to think about the best way to reach them. Are they someone that likes to consume content visually? Are they someone that likes to consume content by reading? What is the best way to engage? So some free tools just to think about with user behavior as you're building your targeting plans. I love the Google Ads and Microsoft Ads audience planners. They are fantastic. They're also really, really powerful at telling you the size of the market, not just how your particular market performs. Data Studio, every single brand needs to have a Data Studio strategy and or someone who knows Data Studio, because you're able to bring in all of the different components. You're able to have the search terms from your Google Ads campaign speak to your SEO, vice versa, so that you can create those targeted experiences and get the insights across departments for creative. And then finally, with analytics, it's a free tool. Now, I grant you, there are a ton of other tools out there that are a lot more robust when it comes to on-site behavior. If you cannot afford the big boy tools, analytics is a simple way just to get that insight. So final takeaways, run those tests in tier B or C markets. Don't test in A until you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's the right structure. You want to leverage those cross-department learnings, have your different departments speak to each other, and you want to honor your customer personas. And with that, I thank you so much, and I'm excited to dive into the panel part of this discussion.
Wow, Nava, that was incredible. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we have some really great questions. So we have someone in the audience in our commenting. We have Perfect Power Wash. They have some really good questions. So I'm going to jump into theirs first. In your experience, do Modals and Popups lead to boosted CRO? How do they interact with Google's new Core Web Vitals and specifically the CLS, cumulative layout shift? And has anyone on the panel dealt with this?
I have feelings, but I just owned the microphone for the past 15, 20 minutes. So I defer to the other panelists if they want to chime in first. I think you're muted.
I hate being that guy.
Good catch, guys. Sorry, guys. I'm never that guy. I don't know why I was that guy to say. But there's a few different. It's not a straight yes or no answer. I think you need to look at a few factors. So we ran a test a while ago, and this is just one isolated test that I'm talking about. But we had a pop-up that was triggering when the person would jump onto the page and start reading the content, and then we tested one that would be scroll based once they got to the bottom. Not exactly exit intent, but once they'd already got to the bottom of the content, and you got to think of the psychology behind the user at that point. If they've got to the end of the article, they most likely like the article and they've read the whole thing, and they're much more warmed and more likely to convert. So we've tested that on the bottom of the scroll when they get to the bottom, and then also exit pop-ups are great too, like Nava was saying, where you've got one last effort to sort of show some value or try and hook them in and get their email, and try to get them onto your list and trying to win them over time from providing value to them too. So it really depends on how you use them, but there's a bunch of different ways: timed, action based. You can trigger one after 30 seconds, 45, 60, whatever, but it can all be tested very easily with a lot of the plugins these days. They're built into the software. So.
Right. I'd say not all plugins are created equal too. So always,
of course,
some are
of course
a lot worse than others.
Sure.
And okay, so she has some more great questions, and I'm going to bring those up. Also, in terms of CRO, what are your opinions on limiting access to the rest of the website? Is it better to create a closed off landing page or provide more information should the user want it?
So this one I am going to jump in on because there are some very important technical SEO components with the first party data piece. So yes, you should close off, in my opinion, the page. However, you want to make sure that how you're structuring the URL of that landing page is not going to set you up to have 1 million vanity domains. The reason for this is because when you have more than 5 vanity domains, it will not count towards your first party data set for Google. So if you're thinking about building lead capture, the whole point of that is so that you can then take those emails and then target them into other ad platforms, so that when the user consents to having their activities tracked, you can have the cookie tracking. If you are going over those 5, you are setting yourself up for trouble. So my recommendation is to either be the best of friends with your technical SEO folks, and think about subfolder subdirectories that are no index, no follow. See if you can work with them to find a way to remove the navigational bar and links off, because again, on the paid media side, we really don't want people clicking off. Or work with your team to create subdomains. Because, and again, this is me quoting Ginny Marvin, who's the ad liaison for Google. Subdomains and country-specific domains are fine. It's just when you have, for example, usabose.com, that would count as a vanity domain. But if you had bose.com or usa.bose.com, those would be fine. So my opinion is yes, and the data I've seen supports this, that yes, you should limit the amount of things the user can do, but you also want to make sure that you're not running afoul of first-party data tracking, and that you're not making a mess for the technical SEOs in the room.
I would appreciate that. So great answer. Anyone else have any insight into that? I think Nava kind of nailed it.
Yeah, I was literally speechless. The whole room just went.
I know, right? Nailed it. Okay.
Yeah, but again, I guess, I think it's from a paid perspective and SEO perspective, but I think in the testing phases, it's also very important too, because it allows you to contain those users and test them in isolation to everything else. Because what you don't want is them being impacted by some other variable, right? So this allows you to test, especially when it's a new traffic source, let's say Facebook ads, which is like the coldest of all colds, and you're trying to nurture them through the thing. It can be like a good starting point with a completely closed off landing page. And the great thing is there's so many page builders now that allow you to do that. You don't need to go and use a tech all the time. There's so many out there for creating just landing pages for that exact purpose.
That's a great soundbite that everyone should write down for how to get bosses to agree to landing page solutions, that you're able to protect your tests. Because if they're about to spend thousands, potentially millions, you want to make sure that the test is protected. Like that is the VIP call out.
Definitely. Fantastic. All right. So Kurt, I have another one for you. All right. So say I don't think I have enough traffic to run a split test on my e-commerce site. What do I do?
So generally all product pages are essentially, like, in a lot of circumstances of clients we work with, they've got a theme out of the box. Their business is, by luck and chance and hard work, blowing up and become hugely successful without any developers, and they've just built it themselves. So what's happened is they've got landing pages that all look exactly the same for all the different products, and they're not customized whatsoever. So what you can do is, if you don't have a lot of traffic, it's a good starting point where you can combine traffic across, let's say you have 100 products and all that traffic's spread over those. As a starting point, you can test major changes. It doesn't really work on super minuscule changes because you won't have enough traffic and it's not hugely statistical significant, but you can combine traffic across 100 pages, let's say, as long as they're all identical, to see if a change will make a difference. Let's say it's add to cart versus buy now versus add to basket or whatever, because in the UK they use add to basket versus add to cart a lot. So you can change that variable and you can test that across all those pages. That would be one example of being able to do that. So
okay, yeah,
I'm sure Dan has some insight on that too. I don't know if he's tested this stuff before across product pages, but it's something we do sometimes. We want to do like a quick first test while we're setting up something more complex.
It's quite interesting when you've got like the parent and child sort of brands going there as well, and it's like I said, even if there's not enough traffic, there's always something that you can be doing, and it's exactly as Kurt and Eric has said, that even if you go too minuscule with it, it's kind of, well, what's the point of the test if we're changing? Very much like I'm quite dyslexic as well, so even like changing the colors of fonts as well it can be really good. Again, if you're testing against certain demographics, building up on those personas, if you are targeting a certain group where the fonts are significant, it's these little things that in tested groups that you can really see quite well. My speciality is this is in Amazon, where you can't change any of the fonts in terms of the CRO. It comes down to the wording of the ads and the different types of colors that you're reaching out with as well. And like I said, as I said right at the start, the parent and child model is really fantastic to try that out, because if there's the only variant is color, it's a really good test and a nice closed test, as Kurt and Eva said, that we want to make sure that there's nothing impacting those other searches as well. So there's a lot of really interesting things you can do even without a lot of traffic. One example is I'm working with an estate agency, real estate for anyone that's not in the UK, and they are very localized. They're focused mostly in the north of England, which, as we appreciate, is probably it's not even a third of a state so we're looking at probably about 8,000 users to the site, and it's about trying to focus that locality in the same instance as well. If someone searched farm conversion Richmond, it's about making sure that we personalize that site on that landing page to make sure that they're not being shown something Berwick upon Tweed or something completely obscure to what they've shown before, and closing that test so they can't just suddenly just jump off somewhere else.
Right. So curious, what do you guys think is the minimum amount of visits that you're going to need, or how long do you run your experiments before you make a decision on the results?
There's a few variables that come into play, and a few of them are how many variables are you trying to track to get that statistical significance. Now, if it's a lead gen website, for instance, where it's a dentist and you're just trying to capture a lead, or maybe a booking where it's got one funnel you're running all the visitors through, you're going to need much, much less than, let's say, an affiliate website that has like top 10 best wireless headphones, where they have 10 different variables that all need to be tracked across all those different things. So we've seen some split tests complete on a lead gen side as low as like 2,500, because the split test winner was so much bigger. So like the bigger the test winner, the less data you need to confirm that it's a winner. And then on the e-commerce side, you can't really go too far below 10,000 for a split test, because you got to remember, it's not just the action of someone adding to cart, it's actually someone purchasing. So the people who will, let's say you're split testing the changing add to cart to buy now, whatever, you need them to go all the way to purchase in order for a conversion to be logged. So the drop off rate from the product page through to the checkout is usually, I don't know, 75 to 90% drop off rate. So yeah, there's a few different ways to answer that, but you can start, if you've got, like us as an agency, we need to consistently provide month-to-month results for our clients. So we need a lot more traffic than, say, if you had a real estate company that you have 2 or 3 months to run a test. It's a bit longer than we'd like because markets change so much in that time. But yeah, you can be more patient with running a test over time because you're not on a recurring monthly or whatever. So.
No, that makes sense. All right. So Renata actually had a great one, and she asked do you have any insights on how much a 30-day return policy, having one versus not having one, might impact conversion rates specifically, she asked for consumer electronics. If it's a store policy, it's really tough to A/B test.
So I have a thought, but Dan,
I could see your face. So I'm more than you go first, and I'll add on to what is about to be probably blow me out of the water anyway.
So one thing worth considering is what the attrition rate or return rate was before implementing this policy versus not. So if I know that this is a new policy, I typically like to make sure that I have at least 6 months of having it running so that I have the ability to see what does that do for actual bottom line revenue. If this is a policy that's always been there, I actually would say you're in a better spot to test, because that is a consistent baseline metric, or it's a baseline experience. The variable would be what it is that you're testing. So if you have, say, for example, someone coming in or you have, say, 100 people coming through and on average, 30 people will return within that 30-day period. And you see that those 30 people go down to, say, 18, then, hey, whatever creative you were doing was great. If at the end of, say, 6 months, and I really would build in 6 months, because if you have 30 days, you want to give time for that kind of crossover period. If at the end of that 6 months, you see, hey, whatever creative I did, it was the same or worse, then you know that it was whatever content you were testing that was responsible for the depreciation. But it's whenever you have that kind of a mechanic, that's That's a big reason why I led the discussion with you want to give yourself 1 to 2 quarters to test a variable, or even 1 to 2 variables per quarter, because you want to give yourself the time for kind of those edge cases that might close right at the end, but then like 15 days later they make a return. So you're able to have honest data.
Yeah, and as I thought, what I'm going to say is probably going to be irrelevant now after that after that explanation. But I mean, I'm biased because I specialize in Amazon services. But my rule of thumb for anything e-commerce, if Amazon's doing it as a standard, you need to be doing it as a standard as well. And they for anything electronic wise, they do have the standard days return. They have even offered up to sort of 60 days. They even sell warranty as well with it. So if you're not doing that as a standard for your e-commerce store, it might not negatively impact you now, but it will going through in the future, because Amazon sort of sets customers' expectations going forward, and we all sort of follow the trend, if that makes sense.
That was brilliant. I don't know why you're downplaying.
No. It's just not as insightful. My go-to method is, if Amazon's doing it, we should do it. I should have that tattooed on my forehead, and then I never speak again.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Philip.
So I was just gonna come at more of like a high level about it. I was just gonna say, like, you got to think about why people want a 30-day return, right? Like, what's their psychology? What's the resistance or the insecurity that they're going through before they make this purchase that would require them, like that would require it to be there. So we used to have a similar protocol. We removed it and it didn't impact conversions whatsoever because we boosted trust in other areas. So by having more reviews, having a shitload of good reviews on Trustpilot and on the website and on Facebook, and surrounding yourself by these trusts where they don't even, like, by the time they come to the site, they've already bought, or they don't need those sort of things. I think maybe at the start you might need them just to be like, oh well, if it doesn't work, I can just get a refund, no biggie. But yeah, you got to think about like why and what you can do if you don't want to offer it. What you can do to boost trust in other ways. Speedy shipping, tons of reviews just always work. Reviews and case studies always work if you want to like really build credibility. So.
Okay, that's gold for sure. And so critical when you're selling online is to build trust. So that'll actually help with organic rankings as well. So, so Tanchery asks, so say he made some landing pages to do some A/B testing. Do you guys know of any services that he could go about to basically get consumer reviews and insight of the landing pages?
So for clarification, are you looking for reviews of the landing page service, or for people to go to the landing page and give feedback on, is this great or not?
Yeah, I mean, I
think that's what the question is. Yeah. I think that's what the question is, like getting people to come in and just give their feedback on it, like user testing, right? Like getting, because there's actually services out there.
Paid ads.
Yeah. Try My UI is an okay one. The user interface is a little bit meh because it requires the user to download a recording file, and sometimes that can be frustrating. The other, I mean, I love Full Story. Just Full Story is very expensive. But if you kind of emailed your existing customers and said, hey, we're looking to test this kind of a conversion experience, would you have bought from us again going here? And you can link to any of those resources or just do it manually. That can be very powerful. The other piece that I will shamelessly plug, tools like Just Do Know. So things that are CRO tools will always have that A/B test baked in. So whether you're doing Just Do Know or Unbounce or any of the others, you will always have the opportunity to see how did that A/B test perform. You won't get the written feedback of what did they think, but you will get the data of how did the user behave on page, and you'll get those insights of what pages performed better, with sometimes suggestions as to why. But I definitely yield the floor if anyone else had an answer to that.
I mean, I would think that ultimately that's the best test to see if it works or not.
I was just going to say you did really well not to just throw Just Don't Know in there straight away. I was kind of like, as soon as the question came up, I was like, and wait, and no, you very, 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 very tactful, I thought.
Well, I think the issue that you come across when you use a user testing, I mean, it's better than not using it. But from my perspective, again, you got to look at the psychology of the people that are on the user testing platforms that are doing the user testing. Sure, they've got a ton of knowledge. They can pick up sites that have fundamental flaws. Sure, but the issue is, I did a test on this on user testing where I hired like 18 or 20 people to come and pick apart our Convertica landing page. I was going to do a case study on it, but I decided it was a bit passive aggressive and decided not to. But so I got them all to pick apart our landing page, and then I actually split tested it to see what the changes would make. And they were overly critical in a negative way, versus when we split tested, and it was actually a far superior page than our original page. So at the end of the day, nothing is better than people that don't know they're being tested, that are just naturally coming to your site because they want to buy a service. Like, nothing is more confirmation than someone actually paying for a service or your product. That is the real indicator if testing will work. So you have to really run real split tests in order to.
Right. Because they're probably not your target audience either.
Well, to piggyback, and that was 1,000% agree. Real people are going to be the best. One thing that every brand should do is to build in, once someone becomes a customer, the opportunity to get feedback in that customer marketing nurture journey. A lot of folks will just ask for feedback on their service, but it is a totally valid question to ask. How easy was it to become a customer? Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, and give them the opportunity to provide feedback. Because sometimes, and I've had this happen, where I've wanted to become a customer, but it was infuriating. Like, thing would cancel out, or I was on a phone, and so the screen, the buttons were too small for the phone, and it just, getting that feedback once someone has become a customer, people who've already bought into you are inclined to buy into you more. So as much as you can build in that into email nurture, 1,000%, Kurt. And please do the case study. It's not passive aggressive. Like, I think
it was too long. It was
too long
ago. It was too long ago now. It's like we've completely gone in a different direction. But I think the cool thing was, I thought that's what the case was. I thought that because a lot of these guys, they get paid to sit and be critical of websites. You don't know how many they've viewed that day. They could have viewed, or what their background was, or like, are they trying to prove that they are a user tester or something and like be good at it? So it completely changes the psychology of a real user that's just clicking around subconsciously without you. So that's my view on it anyway.
It's like how everyone thinks they're a food critic on Yelp.
Exactly.
So Tisha actually asked about having feedback on images in CRO. Most of our clients use stock images because they don't actually have the resources or photos. Is this preferred, or what are your thoughts on stock photos?
100% these days. People are used to, like, photos on phones are like de facto Instagram. Like, I don't know. It's real photos are 100 times better than stock photos. Everyone's been around stock photos for so long, and they're usually on pexels.com, and they're the exact same guy with the beard sitting outside the coffee shop on the web designer side or whatever. Like, they're always the same images. And I think to really illustrate your brand or your product, nothing beats real images, real people holding your product, real reviews of people holding your product. Things like this are far superior, in my opinion. Not in my opinion, from what we've tested.
So there's go ahead.
No, after you.
So the Mass Effect is actually a great case study in this. Mass Effect is a phenomenal video game, recently relaunched, and they actually got mired in controversy because Tali, who was this alien that was hidden for the whole series, the big reveal of what she looked like was a stock photo. And it's like, what? We logged hours and hours for a stock photo. However, as much as I agree, stock photos can be a bit touch and go. If you are low on budget and you're able to artfully use a stock photo and layered into other creative elements that you control, it's not the end of the world. What is the end of the world is sticking a stock photo and then doing average ad copy or average content and then expecting magically that you'll see success. So it's not the end of the world, but you need to bring your business acumen and your creativity that much more, because you're making up for the fact that this is clearly a stock photo.
That's a good point.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I interrupted there.
Oh, no, you're good.
But yeah, 100%. What everyone's just said there. What we've seen in terms of CRO, in terms of Amazon, photographs play a massive role in the conversion rate for that. Even down to the pixel density. Videos are even starting to convert better than actual photos of the. So if you are just putting up stock photos, a lot of people just go with the standards. Here's your product with a white background, because that's what Amazon's T's and C's say. But they're also allowing action shots and action videos as well. And there's so many different filters you can put on your phone now. Like it would almost be a shame if you didn't take that little bit of extra time and extra care, because if you're selling a product that everyone's doing, you're just putting standard out there, you're just going to get standard results at the very best. If you're doing something creative, or you've got, even for example, a client of mine sells metal straws. They had one photo on Amazon, and it was just of the metal straw, and they couldn't understand why the sales were going there. We literally put them in action shots, put them in use with people in clubs, and then taking them around as a environmentally friendly alternative, and the sales just went up massively, and we did nothing but change those photographs as well. So there's, in terms of the Amazon side of things, do your absolute best, and appreciate what everyone said. You might not have the budget, but there's so many different filters you can download on your phone.
Exact same thing. Don't take those manufacturer images. You got to do custom. Yes, Nava.
One other point I just want to make before we move on, because I acknowledge we do need to move on from this topic, but I want to make a quick point on the B2B side and the enterprise side. Stock photos. When you use stock photos, you want to make sure that you have you've combed through the policies for usage, and your company across the board has adopted it. So where an individual one-off brand can sometimes get away, or if you're using it through the app platforms and it's their integration, it can sometimes be okay. But if you are on the B2B side, you are inherently going to be exposed to a lot more risk, because by the nature of the sales cycle, you are going to be collecting a lot more emails. You have a lot more touch points, and it creates that many more opportunities for content, if it wasn't properly protected, if you didn't secure the rights properly, to go blow out of proportion. So, not saying that you should avoid stock photos or go towards them. You just want to make sure that you have a policy in place that protects you and your brand, not just from the customer thinks we're boring and write bad ads, but also legally, and so that you don't get hit with fines.
Right. So like securing the right license type for your usage, but then also if it's like Creative Commons and they require a backlink or something like that, it's definitely something to be aware of, because yeah, I've seen those lawsuits happen, so it's not fun.
And just be careful too. There's a lot of guys acting as law firms, scamming people, and like finding an image that's on Pexels or on some of the other free sites, and then saying, like I know a handful of people that have been stung with $65,000 invoices, $50,000 invoices, and then you just don't answer and nothing ever happens. But they do get some people from it, so that's something to be aware of too.
Scammers, man. So Perfect Power Wash, she has some really great questions. She was asking, what are some of the resources you use to determine consumer psychology? Good one. Is it a combination of organization, insight, gut feeling, stuff like Hotjar, compared against a CVR, or white pages somewhere?
I can see you dying to say something. You're just waiting for one of us to go first, aren't you? You really want to say something.
Take the lead.
So, actually, I was waiting for my dog to exit the frame. So, when it comes to user psychology, there is a lot that can be said for gut feelings just for anecdotes, but you want to make sure that you're substantiating that with real data. So whether that's doing customer feedback groups, one of my favorite ways to do this is actually, and I realize that this is more of a B2B or just larger org question, but when you bring your CS, your marketing, your sales organizations together, and you powwow about user feedback, and you disseminate that information, that can be a very powerful way to really learn what are your prospects saying, feeling, responding, what are your customers constantly complaining about, finding glitches with. I actually prefer full story over Hotjar. But that's might be because my experiences with Hotjar versus full story, I needed the full walkthrough, the full visual, and just full story is great for that. So shameless plug, I am not affiliated with full story, but what's actually really useful about that is that they have a mechanic, what's called rage clicks, where a user thinks that they should be able to click a thing, but then they can't, or things that cause a user to go idle. Going to one of the other questions, I don't know if we'll get to it fully, but in terms of what would generate more form fills, like what can cause someone to abandon a form fill process. So yes, that you should balance, and you can balance the anecdotal data of gut feeling, but you also want to make sure that you're balancing that with real data of user behavior, whether that's through analytics as a free version, whether it's Hotjar on the cheap, something like Full Story, things like that.
Interesting.
I'd 100% back that up as well. And there's one thing from an e-commerce perspective that often gets overlooked. If you sell your product in store, imagine you're doing that while you when you're writing for the pieces online as well, because you're selling to the same customers. They might be doing a little bit different in terms of how they act, etc. But if you can speak to one of the people that sells your products on a day-to-day basis, talking to them about how to sell it online is massively valuable in terms of looking at customer resources as well. And one of the last things as well is never a popular opinion, but I use it all the time to try and get buy-in from our higher up. So hopefully I've not just given that away and I've not just talked myself out my next raise. But reading books around the psychology of a sale. Now, we're not all salespeople on the call. I know a lot of us have to do a lot with new business, some less than others, but reading books around the psychology of selling to people, even like, because we're all people to people, no matter what we're doing, whether we're selling B2B, B2C, FMCG, whatever, there's still the element of the sell in there. So reading books like that or online articles along those sort of lines as well, that been massively valuable in terms of how we come up with the data in terms of building ready for our tests, etc.
I like that. Yeah, that's true. We're all selling in some ways, so I can imagine we'd all benefit from reading about the psychology of sales.
I mean, don't go full Wolf of Wall Street with it, but you know, there's some happy in betweens.
For sure. So Magnana, I don't know if I said that right. I'm sorry if I slaughtered it. For a software service website, what would be one top tip that would bring in more form fills or leads? So what's your go-to to increase, I would assume, with the current traffic that you get?
So we do a lot of tests on our current website, but also we used to work with a lot of lead gen websites, mostly e-commerce websites now, but a lot of lead gen websites, and multi-step forms when done correctly are just game changers. So the issue is when someone sees a massive form of like 8 to 10 to 12 steps, I mean, unless they're sitting down with a coffee and like can have the headspace, they're not going to impulsively fill it out. Whereas we've all been there before when there's only one field showing, enter your email, sign up for my free whatever, or I don't know, get your free audit or whatever. And then the next step is your name and email. And it progressively, it either starts with the lowest value information and then ask for the highest at the end when you've already committed to the rest of the form, or vice versa, you ask for the most important and highest value information like an email, phone number at the start. And then because they've already given that, they'll be more likely to fill it out because they know they've already given you that information. So like a Agoda does it really well, where they don't add in the tax or the final price right until the end when you've spent 15 minutes filling out all your information. And they would have tested that to the millionth degree, where they know that people aren't bouncing. I've been there before, where they chuck on 8%. You're like, oh, well, I've already filled it out. Fuck it, it's all good. So
1,000%. I've been in that exact situation, and I, to my shame, will bounce away, go look for another fare, and then we'll still end up buying the fare. But one other point on generating form fills, especially if your software provides a value, sometimes it's nice to kind of engineer a free thing that you've already gotten the user's consent that they want that information. So even if you can't get the full information, you can already get a sense of, okay, this website, user-backed information says it has X number of visits per month, or it spends X for ad spend, or it's connected with these tools. Because typically, if the user is looking for a software solution, they're looking for it either to integrate with their current offering, or they're looking for it to integrate with others. And so you can kind of get that information back. Now, granted, you might lose the user when you finally ask them to give your email so you can get the report mailed to you. But you at least have a customer profile that you've begun to build for whatever website. So you can then begin to follow back up and create that customer profile in whatever CRM you're using. There are a ton of tools out there that, and this is more on the sales side than the CRO side, but that can enable you to find the right point person to connect with, and you can begin to feed in that information that you collected, even if you couldn't get the contact information. But that shows that you've done your homework and you're approaching with a targeted offer, as opposed to a, hey, buy my stuff, I'm great. Because it's about delivering value. When you deliver value at the head, it's a lot easier to get that information. If you're kind of demanding information at the front, it's a little bit tougher. But Kurt, 1,000% forms and stages with a little progression bar telling us how far we are, so that we don't
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah.
So that we
want to gamify. We call it gamifying the form. So it's like we had this client 2 or 3 years ago. They were a marketplace for selling websites, and in order for you to list your website to be, not to be sold, but to get a valuation, and they go and their team goes and works out how much your website will be worth, there was literally 50 fields. Like, it was the most like intense form to fill out. So it was just like, I know that people would rather get on a call and just go through it. But so what we did was we broke down each step into what are the most common answers, and there would be like 4 or 5 multiple choice that they could just click. Especially on mobile, this like blew hundreds of % out of the water, where they could just click and it would go to the next slide, and it was like gamified, and they would just fly through these fields like it was nothing. And then at the end, you gamified it, and we made it feel like a game. To get your answer, you reach the end, and we like had the image show up, and then it was like, you've reached the end to send this off, boom, and then it sends off, and we'll get back to you in 48 hours. And it had, overall, it was like, there was a multi-million-dollar or like 8-figure business. Ended up increasing the leads by 50, 60%, something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but it was huge. And from the same traffic, from the same everything, just by gamifying the form. Yeah, so that was great.
I hate people like you that put gamifying, because I just like Nava just said, I always go to it, because no matter what I do, I'm just hooked and I want to get into it as well. So I didn't realize that was a thing, and now I hate you for telling me that it's a thing.
Oh no, it's a thing, and
I love that.
People are used to being on apps, so you want to make it, especially on mobile devices, you want to make it feel like an app and code it like an app. You don't want it to feel like you're on a website, because you want people to be in that flow state where they're not realizing they're giving you information until they have, until the email comes up and they've just spent 5 minutes filling out your quiz or whatever.
Graders, quizzes, spin to wins, all of it. And then you turn it into a game to unlock the next level of content too. So it's with the upsell.
There's a PR piece in this somewhere as well. I feel it. Adding on to something Nava mentioned earlier about using the CRM in the emails section as well. Don't be afraid to filter people out. if you've got a lot of traffic, but you've got a massive bounce rate, you can use the data in your CRM to filter out who your target audience is going to be, but you can also use it to filter out people that have not searched certain terms before they come to you on PPC. So if someone's searched for, I don't know, I'm just going to go with this payroll software US, and they fit into your CRM and persona model, you can then target them with a certain ad to then pull back into the funnel, rather than someone that's just doing it for a certain size business as well. So you can help use that data to filter on certain sizes of business. You can use the LinkedIn data as well from that as well. So a lot of cross-platform filters that you can put in place. You won't get a lot of people coming through, but the people you do come through will be the people that you're looking for in that as well.
Interesting. So what you're talking about personalization, what part do personas play in CRO?
I think from my do you want to finish that, or you can? To me, it's a massive deal in terms of e-commerce and who I'm targeting and what we're targeting them with. Just for an example, we work with a car finance business, and persona building in that is absolutely critical. If we're putting in the ad, we know that if someone's techie, we put in the ad about them being a techie, what type of car they've got. So for example, we were targeting techie Mercedes drivers, and just by adding that personalization within the title and then making sure the landing page was personalized from that, we managed to up sales by 132% just by adding those details in there. And it's not rocket science. It is difficult to do if you don't know what you're doing, but once you've got through that initial stage and adding that persona data in and filling it in, because you can use just Google's or Bing's own persona data, but if you can add it in and really understand your customer, you can be miles ahead of everybody else.
I have one data point to add to that, and then I also want to be extremely respectful of the fact that it's, what is it now, 1:00 in the morning for you, Kurt? And you're
I'm all good.
I did a study back in 2019 looking at if you have no audiences attached versus customer-less audiences versus the native, i.e. like in-market, things like that. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you layer in the audience and you target your messaging, you will see better performance. Up to 75% better performance on cost per acquisition if you layer in some degree of targeting, some degree of persona message mapping, than if you don't. What I found really interesting is that there was an improved 15 or so % on customer lists than website visitors. And it was about a 30% improvement over, say, in market. So as much as yes, the native platforms, and that's for customer lists where the user gives their email or their phone and then you target them. So as much as yes, the native platforms are going to be fine, and the cohorts that will all get added into and the affinities that we're associated with will all be useful to a certain degree for targeting. The more you can build in strategies today, right now, for on-site CRO, so that you can collect that email, you can collect that phone to then have that conversation down the road, whether it's prospecting or targeting, you will be in a better spot because that is the one form of targeting. All the ad platforms, regardless of whether it's Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, all of them, they are all bought into first-party data still being a targeting mechanism. So as much as you can build in the strategies today for on-site CRO, you're setting yourself up in a good spot.
Wow. Yes, you guys have brought some incredible insights. I just want to take a moment to thank our audience that's listening live. So many great comments. We appreciate all the good questions. If we did not get to your questions, don't be afraid to follow our speakers on social, on Twitter, and tweet at them. I'm sure they would appreciate it. Kurt will get to them tomorrow morning because he needs to go right to bed. So Kurt Phillips, Dan, Sanders, Nava Hopkins, you guys brought it. You're amazing. I appreciate you guys joining me today.
Thanks. It was great. It was fun.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.